Okay, you have already written a book review on Karen Armstrong's The Great Transformation, and so you're well acquainted with the concept of an axial age. Now, in the discipline of history, this often, scholarship, I should say, often involves a conversation about topics that are raised, about arguments that scholars make, and so this first analysis paper asks you to kind of evaluate the validity of Armstrong's argument about the axial age by doing your own reading of primary sources. And the three texts that are assigned for the week, and really for this assignment, are Confucius' Analects. I've only asked you to read books 1 through 5 of that, so this is just part of it. The Bhagavad Gita, which of course is this text from ancient India. And I will say with the Bhagavad Gita, there are 18 discourses in the Bhagavad Gita. If you read very closely the first and second discourses and then, skim a lot of the rest, I would recommend reading a summary of all of these, in fact. And so, if you go, for instance, to the Wikipedia page for each of these texts, you'll find a pretty decent summary. And I would actually encourage you to read that before you actually try to dive into the text. That way, you'll know what's coming. You'll know, where what to look for, so to speak. But the first two discourses of the Bhagavad Gita lay out, I think, the most important principles. There is important elaboration on some of those in later texts. This is why it's important to read maybe a summary of it, because you can know that, all right, in this discourse, this is where Krishna is telling Arjuna about this concept, and maybe I want to look a little more closely at that because I think that's something that I could use to respond to this paper prompt. And it's the same with the symposium. There are a series of speeches in the symposium. I think it's obvious that the most important one of these is Socrates' speech. And so if you read a summary of the symposium, you get a sense of what the other dialogue partners are saying. And some of them are important, right? And Socrates is responding to these other opinions about things. But Socrates' speech is kind of the capstone of the whole thing. What I'm saying here is you don't have to read every word of these texts. I know it's a lot of reading, and especially in a summer course, this is very condensed and comes fast and furious, right? So if you're put off by the amount of reading that you have to do for this week, I think there are ways around this, so to speak. Okay, so anyway, that's a little kind of excursion into strategies maybe for reading this material. But you need to evaluate the concept of an axial age. Do these texts, in your opinion, based on your reading, support this notion? But in addition, you need to work through an alternate reading of these texts. And so set your mind aside from Armstrong's argument. Okay, what other ways are there to read these things? One that I might suggest is to read them as evidence of their immediate context. The Warring States period in China, and the Analects, I think, are important evidence of that specific context. Maybe they link up with this notion of an axial age as well, but we can learn a great deal about China in the 6th and 5th centuries BCE by reading Confucius's works. And it's the same with the Bhagavad Gita, right? For the late first millennium. It's the dating of the Bhagavad Gita is a difficult thing, but the late first millennium India, maybe between the Mauryan dynasty and the Gupta Empire, when there were a number of competing kingdoms in the Indian subcontinent. That's when this text is written, but it's responding right to things that are existing in the context, like these earlier works like the Vedas and the Upanishads, and the concepts that come from them. And the Bhagavad Gita is trying to deal with that and sort of create its own approach to the religion. The symposium, I elaborated on the context in the video about the symposium, but this is written by Plato in the 4th century BCE, after the Peloponnesian War tore Greece apart and really compromised Athens' position in Greece. And in the aftermath of that, of course, they put Socrates to death in a way to create or to use him as a scapegoat for the problems Athens was having after the war. The Symposium and other Platonic dialogues are written, with that knowledge in mind. And that he brings in a character like Alcibiades, who was a notorious traitor during the war, and he turns him into this kind of laughing stock character, or he makes a fool of himself, right? That's an important choice that Plato makes. And so I might suggest, trying to treat these or think of them in their immediate context rather than the transcultural one. So, and that's not the only way. I mean, these texts are often read as, being full of timeless lessons. That's another approach you could take with this. You need to do your own reading of these outside of the Axial Age. And then the third part of this is to evaluate both approaches and to, explain which of these you think is more important. Is the transcultural perspective a legitimate and maybe the best way to read texts like this? Or, is the more localized or regionalized or immediate context situation or strategy, I should say better, is the timeless message strategy the one that appeals to you the most? And really this is about your opinion, but you need to back up your opinion with solid evidence. Make sure that you're working through specific passages. That's what it says here in the prompt, right? Make sure you work through specific passages from the primary sources as part of your discussion. And then you need to explain clearly why you prefer one over the other, why you think that this approach that you have chosen is optimal, or is the Axial Age one the most compelling, and why? Why is it? I've said, the rationale for the prompt is that arguing for or against a scholarly thesis is an essential skill for a student of history, and Armstrong is giving us a scholarly thesis. But then, it's important also to develop your own strategies for reading primary sources. So I'm asking you to do both of those. It's somewhat of a complex assignment, but I think that this develops important skills for students of history, and really for students more generally. So if you have questions, there is always the live session, and you can ask these on discussion boards, but feel free to reach out to me personally as well. I'm happy to help. Thanks.